The familiar Thanksgiving story taught to all but perhaps the very youngest among us left out a lot. Like the fact that the indigenous Wampanoag people of what is now Massachusetts and Rhode Island had lived in a complex society for thousands of years before the Mayflower arrived at Plymouth Rock. And there was very little information, if any, about how it was that Squanto and others could speak English. It seemed something of a miracle, but wasn't. Nor was there much information about the long legacy of displacement and ill treatment of the indigenous communities that came with the arrival of the Europeans. Now, with the passing of generations and a deepening societal sensitivity to the lived experiences of indigenous communities, our nation's Thanksgiving story is becoming told in a more accurate way, and many different voices are heard and honored. While it's true that the Pilgrims did come over on the Mayflower in 1620, it's also true that the harvest celebration that occurred in 1621 was not the first Thanksgiving. The Native American tribes of New England already held autumn harvest feasts and had a very regular practice of gratitude as part of their spiritual life. For the natives of this continent, each day is a day of giving thanks to Mother Earth. And this morning, we have the opportunity to hear an adaptation of the Mohawk Nation Morning Thanksgiving Address written by Chief Jake Swamp, a chief of the Wolf Clan within the much larger Mohawk clan. And Lily will share our story for us.
I pop the can of food open and spoon some of the contents of it onto a plate. Next, I push the remaining contents of the can around until I locate the gravy that has congealed at the bottom of the can. I portion out some of it so that there will always be some gravy for every serving left in the can. I carefully spread the portion of gravy over the top of the food in the dish. As I carry the dish of food over, I make a licking sound and place the dish on the floor. I stroke my cat, Regis, and say, "Enjoy." And that is the power of gravy. Just why do so many of us love gravy so much? Gravy seems to embody an intense savory flavor. It's very concentrated, very pleasing, and the making of gravy is not entrusted to just anyone. Oh no. For many of us, there is a designated family or friend that makes the gravy on holidays that will be spooned over many of the dishes served on one's plate with assurances, "There's plenty more gravy in the pan." Why do they make gravy boats so small? Even with 2 gravy boats on the table, it's never enough. Gravy has the power to enhance the flavor of the most delicious food and to mask a dish's flavor that the cook is expectantly waiting for your approval of. What is that? This is broccoli with cranberry and prune sauce. I think I'll just add a little bit of gravy. As we begin the preparation for Thanksgiving, I have another theory about the power of both gravy and each of our Thanksgiving tables, whether they be with family, friends, or in the community. Gravy's savory essence represents that fleeting moment of intense pleasure that we long to capture for an indefinite period of time. And the table, well, the holiday table, represents the need to belong, to be part of, and to be seen for who we are. There's a slide coming up. During the holidays, the yearning for belonging and acceptance is supercharged. Many of us tend to romanticize the holidays. We may have a fantasy about what family life should be at this time of the year. Loving, happy, accepting, warm. When loved ones gather, we may hold an expectation for 100% all loving, all happy, all accepting, and all warm holiday. When that doesn't happen, and how can it? We reside on the earth plane. Families are families, friends are friends, communities are communities. But when our expectations are not met, we can be disappointed. Criticism and insensitive remarks go right in and register as proof of not being understood or seen for who we are or even being loved. Given the supercharged way many of us approach holidays, our expectations could be dashed. And that's what I call the holiday crash cycle. As we ask ourselves, is there room at the table for me? Is the table a place where I can see myself reflected in others? Can I be seen for who I truly am? And is that true for every person sitting at table? For many years, I have brought a poem, a blessing, or a prayer to the family Thanksgiving table. This has been met with mixed reactions. Often there is at least one family member who rolls their eyes at the rich metaphors I am feasting on and regaling them with. Depending on the status of my mental well-being any given year, my reaction can range within a spectrum from, ouch, those rolling eyes hurt, or I am not understood or loved by this mob, or finally crescendoing into, how is it that I was born into this family? Has anyone ever felt you were thrown a curveball right before a holiday? Suddenly alone for the holiday, or celebrating with strangers, or with a part of family that is the hardest to be with, or having to travel a farther distance than planned. This is a good one, being asked at the last minute to bring a dish that is really hard to make. Or just maybe there is a storm with snow and ice. All of this interrupting the expectation of pleasure, acceptance, and belonging before you even leave the house. These curveballs often require a type of resiliency, the ability to extract meaning out of inconvenience and misfortune. But then there are the moments of unexpected grace that seem to descend upon us and stay with us in the heart space we call memory. And very often when we gather for holidays, if we are lucky or smart enough to remember, we actually tell each other the stories, right? We regale each other with family stories. One Thanksgiving, my brother was washing dishes at the sink after the meal. Van Morrison's Have I Told You Lately That I Love You was playing. All of a sudden, my brother slung the dish towel over his shoulder and grabbed my mother and began dancing to the tune. They say that persons with Alzheimer's can retain the words to songs long after their memory is impaired because lyrics are stored in a different part of the brain. I am here to tell you that the same must be true for dance moves. My mother's shuffle was replaced by the posture of a young dancer in a ballroom from the Bronx as she proceeded to tear up the dance floor, grace descending, a wonder to behold. Here is a poem that speaks to the arrival of the unbidden. The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorable. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So we know that holidays can be both wonderful and sometimes hard. And with expectations of connecting, being seen and heard and loved, we can be disappointed by what happens at our table that day. Using gravy as the metaphor for savory pleasure, sometimes it does fall short. Whoops. That gravy is burnt. That gravy tastes awful. That gravy is the best I've ever had, and I would kill for it. That gravy has meat in it, and I'm a vegetarian. That gravy is being passed to me by someone who doesn't believe what I believe. That gravy was just handed to me by someone I love. Maybe someday I will tell them. So how do we accept that our holiday can be a mixed event and avoid the holiday crash? We have a plan. And there is a code for the plan. And the code is 3 simple words. Pass the gravy. Can everyone repeat that with me? Pass the gravy. Yes. So here are the 3 tools for navigating Thanksgiving. First tool, notice and understand what sets you off and how it makes you feel. We call this consciousness, and with consciousness comes choice. Second tool, extend grace to one another. Assume good faith despite a critical barb or inappropriate behavior directed at you. Believe it or not, they are not always an expression of contempt or rejection, quite the opposite. They're often an imperfect bid for connection. Oh, if we could only hold that, right? So in addition to saying grace, extend grace and kindness to one another. And our third tool is to treat lightly and lovingly, tread lightly and lovingly around politics and recent world events. When I was a young girl, Ireland was in the midst of the Troubles, with violence a hallmark of the times. My mother and her sisters would remain at the holiday table long after the meal to chew over current events. Often, being from an Irish immigrant neighborhood in the Bronx, it would turn to the Troubles, and before long, voices were raised and they wound up mad at each other. But this is what astonished me. They were in total agreement and still wound up mad at each other. We are experiencing heartbreaking news from the Middle East. There are people in this room who are worried for their family's safety, who know persons killed or missing. There are people in this room who are traumatized by these events. Perhaps this topic at the table is best held by deep listening and prayers and blessings for complex conflict to be made whole. This year, I will come to the family table with a poem about gratitude. This time, if there are rolled eyes, bring it on, because this year I come to the table with the understanding that we belong to one another imperfectly and deeply forever and ever. My blessing to you is to travel well, both for long distance travel and the traveled space of the heart that can see love where there is criticism, or feel longing despite not feeling a part of things. So as we sit at table this Thursday, we give thanks for family, friends, community, fellowship, and for all the imperfect ways we are seen, understood, and loved. We pray that our own capacity to understand, to behold and love the other will deepen. Bless all the ways we come together and all the kinds of tables that hold who we are and who we love. One final exaltation. Please say it with me. 3 words ends in gravy. Pass the gravy.